Imagine a place where asphalt was so hot it melted women's shoes right off their feet. Imagine a crowd of 28,000 people storming the gates with ladders like an invading army. Imagine a theme park with no water in a record-breaking heat wave. You think I am telling you a disaster story? I am. But this is not fiction. This is the opening day of Disneyland, July 17th, 1955. History books call it magic, but the people who were there call it Black Sunday. Hello, friends. I'm Pop Pop. Today we are looking at the nightmare that almost destroyed the dream. To understand this day, you have to understand the risk. Walt Disney was 53 years old. He was already a legend in Hollywood, but he was bored. He had a vision of a park where parents and children could have fun together, but nobody believed in him. His own brother Roy thought it was a terrible idea. The bankers called it Walt's folly. They were sure he would go bankrupt. Walt had to borrow against his own life insurance just to pay for the design. He sold his vacation home in Palm Springs. He put everything he owned on the line. If this park failed, he would lose everything. The construction was a frantic race against the clock. Anaheim, California, was just quiet farmland covered in walnut trees and orange groves. In just 1 year, Walt tried to transform 160 acres of dirt into a magic kingdom. The schedule was so tight that trees were being planted just minutes before the gates opened. In fact, many of the weeds were not removed. The landscapers just put fancy Latin signs in front of the weeds so people would think they were exotic plants. But nothing could prepare them for the morning of July 17th, 1955. This was supposed to be a special press preview. Only 11,000 people were invited. These were studio executives, reporters, and Hollywood celebrities. But Walt and his team made a critical mistake. They sent out paper tickets. And in 1955, there were plenty of clever counterfeiters. People forged tickets by the thousands. Two friends would stand at the gate. One would hand his ticket to the collector, and when the collector turned his head, he would pass the ticket back through the fence to his friend. Suddenly, instead of 11,000 people, a massive crowd of 28,000 people descended on the park. The result was the mother of all traffic jams. The line of cars on the Santa Ana freeway stretched for 7 miles. It was a parking lot. Engines were overheating in the summer sun. Radiators were blowing steam. Families abandoned their cars on the side of the highway and walked the rest of the way. Some people were so desperate to get in that they brought ladders and leaned them against the perimeter fence, climbing over like it was a fortress siege. And then there was the heat. Oh, the heat! It was a scorching 101 degrees Fahrenheit. That is 38 degrees Celsius. It was a record-breaking heat wave, and this leads us to the most famous disaster of the day, the case of the missing water. Just days before the opening, a local plumbers union went on strike. The construction was not finished. The general contractor came to Walt with a terrible choice. He said, "Walt, we can finish the toilets or we can finish the drinking fountains, but we cannot do both by Sunday." Walt did not hesitate. He shouted that people could drink Pepsi, but they could not pee in the street. He ordered them to finish the toilets. So on the hottest day of the year, with 28,000 sweating people, there was not a single working drinking fountain in the entire park. The guests were furious. They accused Walt of being greedy. They thought he turned off the water on purpose just to force them to buy soda. To make matters worse, the soda stands ran out of drinks within hours. People were fainting from dehydration. It was a public relations nightmare. But the heat caused another problem that nobody predicted. Main Street, USA had been paved with asphalt just the night before. Asphalt needs time to cure and harden. But in that 100-degree oven, the street turned into a thick, black, sticky swamp. This was the 1950s, so people dressed up for the park. Men wore suits, and women wore elegant dresses with high heels. As the ladies stepped onto Main Street, their sharp heels sank straight into the soft tar. It was like quicksand. The more they struggled, the deeper they sank. You could see women abandoning their expensive shoes right there in the street and walking away barefoot, their feet burning on the hot ground. It was chaos. While the guests were struggling, the television broadcast was turning into a comedy of errors. This was the largest live broadcast in history up to that point. It was hosted by future President Ronald Reagan, along with Art Linkletter and Bob Cummings. But technology in 1955 was clumsy. Cables were everywhere. At one point, Bob Cummings was caught on camera kissing a dancer because he did not know he was on air. Ronald Reagan was seen tripping over thick cables as he tried to run to his next position. Everything was unscripted and frantic. In Fantasyland, a gas leak was discovered near Sleeping Beauty Castle. They had to evacuate the entire area, fearing an explosion. Flames were literally seen shooting up from the ground before workers managed to cap the leak. Over in Frontierland, things were sinking, literally sinking. The Mark Twain riverboat was a beautiful paddle wheeler meant to carry a specific number of passengers. But the crowd was uncontrollable. 500 people forced their way onto the boat, filling every inch of the deck. The boat was so heavy that it settled into the mud at the bottom of the man-made river. The water began to flow over the deck, soaking the guests' shoes. It took 20 minutes to push the boat loose while people screamed and shouted. Meanwhile, the restaurants ran out of food. By early afternoon, most stands had absolutely nothing left to sell, not even a hot dog bun. Walt Disney watched much of this from the window of his private apartment above the fire station on Main Street. He did not know the full extent of the disaster until the next morning when he read the newspapers. The headlines were brutal. They called it a dark day for Disney. Critics said the park was unfinished, unsafe, and a total failure. Walt was devastated. But this is where the character of the man shines through. He did not hide. He did not blame others. He woke up the next morning and went to work. He invited the press back for a private second chance. He fixed the fountains. He hardened the asphalt. He improved the ticket system. He listened to the complaints, and he solved them one by one. Within 7 weeks, 1 million guests had visited Disneyland. It became the greatest success story in entertainment history. But it is important to remember that Sunday. It reminds us that even the most magical things in life require hard work, grit, and the courage to keep going when the world is laughing at you. Today, nobody remembers the melting shoes or the gas leaks. They only remember the joy. And maybe that is the real magic, turning a nightmare into a dream. Now let us see if you were paying attention to the chaos of that historic day. It is time for your Brain Prime quiz. Question 1. What nickname was given to the disastrous opening day of Disneyland? Black Sunday. Question 2. What happened to the women who wore high heels on Main Street? They sank into the melting asphalt. Question 3. Why were there no working water fountains in the park? Because of a plumber's strike. You did wonderful today. Now I have a question for you. If you could build your own theme park, what would be the main attraction? Tell me your ideas in the comments below. I read every single one. Stay curious and keep your dreams alive. Bye now.